Chapter 1. The Stray on Sector 13. The cold metallic hum of the workshop echoed throughout the dimly lit space, a constant reminder of the long hours Jack had put into the ship repairs, his body aching from the repetitive tasks. The workbench was cluttered with tools, parts, and machinery, pieces of alien technology that seemed more like a puzzle than anything he truly understood. It was the life he had chosen, or rather, the life that had chosen him. On Sector 13, a lowly mechanic shop was about as good as it got, and for Jack, that was fine. The planet was a forgotten mining colony, its value having long since been depleted. Yet, the ships that came in and out of the sector were a constant reminder of the galaxy's larger pulse, and Jack had come to accept his place in the world as a small part of a much larger machine. His hands were calloused from years of working on old ship-star freighters, cargo vessels, abandoned shuttles, and now, more than ever, it seemed like no matter how many times he cleaned up the oil or repaired a malfunctioning engine, the work always came back to him. The colony wasn't much of a place for excitement. It wasn't a booming metropolis or a hub for galactic exploration. It was a place where people like him could get by, repair what needed fixing, and live with the satisfaction of a job well done, even if no one ever noticed. Jack was okay with that. He had learned long ago not to expect much more. He didn't need the flashy adventure stories or high-profile jobs that other techs in the more populated sectors sought. He just needed peace, and the quiet, lonely hum of the workshop offered that in spades. It was his sanctuary, his refuge from the world outside. The door to the shop creaked open, and the faint hiss of the airlock barely registered in Jack's mind. The routine was always the same. A ship would come in needing repair, and he'd be the one to take care of it. But this time, as he turned his head to see who had entered, his eyes widened slightly in surprise. It wasn't the usual crew, and it wasn't the kind of vessel that typically passed through this sector. Standing in the doorway was a small figure, barely a silhouette against the harsh light outside, holding something in its hands. At first, Jack thought it was a small alien child, but as the figure stepped into the dim light of the workshop, it became clear that it wasn't a child at all. What it was, however, remained a mystery. The creature was small, about the size of a large cat, with large, glowing amber eyes that blinked at him from beneath a mess of fur. Its fur was patchy and disheveled, giving it an almost sickly appearance. It had short ears, pointed and slightly twitching, and small, sharp claws that seemed to dig into whatever it was clutching in its arms. The creature's body was long, its tail swishing nervously, and as it stepped closer, Jack realized it wasn't a child or an animal from his world. No, this creature was an alien, one he had never seen before. The alien's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The creature's voice broke the silence, a soft, almost melodic sound that didn't seem to come from its mouth at all. It was like the voice echoed in Jack's mind, a faint telepathic message, "Please, help." The words were simple, yet the weight behind them was anything but. It wasn't a command, nor was it a plea for a favor. It was a desperate request for survival, one that hung in the air like a fragile thread. Jack blinked, his mind trying to process the unexpected visitor and the odd way it communicated. What is that?" he muttered under his breath, more to himself than to the alien creature. The creature tilted its head slightly, as if it understood his confusion. Its eyes softened, and then it took a hesitant step forward. It was carrying something, an old, tattered blanket wrapped around a small bundle. Jack's gaze shifted to the blanket, curiosity stirring in him. Slowly, cautiously, the alien unwrapped the fabric, revealing what lay inside. Jack's breath caught in his throat. It was a kitten, a small, alien kitten, its fur a mix of glowing green and blue patches, its skin sleek and iridescent. The creature's fur rippled as it mewed softly, its tiny paws struggling to find purchase on the smooth surface of the workbench. Jack was taken aback by the sight. He'd seen many strange creatures in his time as a mechanic, but never anything like this. It wasn't just any kitten, it was something entirely new, something that shouldn't have been in this sector, or any sector for that matter. The alien looked at Jack once more, its eyes pleading. "Please, take care of it," it said silently, though the words were now clear in his mind. "It's dying." Jack's eyes flicked between the creature and the kitten. The alien wasn't asking for his help, it was offering a last, desperate request. His gaze softened, though his rational mind told him to remain cautious. There were many unknowns here, and the idea of taking in an abandoned alien kitten was both absurd and dangerous. However, the desperation in the creature's voice, combined with the fragile life in front of him, overruled his hesitation. Jack took a deep breath and moved toward the workbench, his hands trembling slightly as he reached out to the small alien creature. The kitten mewed softly again, its tiny body trembling from exhaustion. Jack could feel the heat radiating off it, a feverish warmth that sent a pang of concern through his chest. He gently cradled the creature in his arms, making sure to handle it carefully, as if it were something fragile, delicate. The alien creature watched with a look of relief on its face, but there was still a sorrow in its eyes, one that Jack couldn't quite place. "All right," Jack said softly, speaking more to himself than to the alien. "I'll help, but you'll need to explain yourself." The alien didn't respond with words, but the soft rumble of its low voice was still present in Jack's mind. It was a simple message, one that Jack understood all too well. This kitten was important, and its survival was imperative. It wasn't just a pet or a stray. It was a creature from another world, one that had been cast aside, abandoned, and left to die. As Jack carefully set the kitten down on a soft surface near the workbench, he moved to gather supplies, his mind racing with questions. He had always been a mechanic, a fixer, someone who repaired broken machines, but this was different. This wasn't an engine or a ship in need of repair. This was a living being, a sentient creature, and Jack felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility fall on his shoulders. This wasn't just about fixing something mechanical. It was about saving a life that had somehow found its way to him, a life that depended on his expertise in a way he had never imagined. He worked through the night, performing what little he knew of first aid, using whatever tools he had on hand to stabilize the kitten. He used medical supplies he kept in case of emergencies, though they were far from advanced enough for alien creatures. Still, he did what he could. His heart pounded in his chest as he monitored the kitten's condition, trying to fight back the feelings of helplessness that gnawed at him. By the time dawn broke, Jack had managed to stabilize the kitten, its breathing steadying, its fever slowly subsiding. The alien creature, still standing in the doorway, watched silently, its eyes filled with gratitude. Jack wiped his brow, exhaustion setting in, but he felt a strange sense of accomplishment. For all the hardships and loneliness of his life on Sector 13, this small, fragile creature had brought something new into his world, something worth protecting, something worth fighting for. As Jack sat back, letting out a long sigh, he looked at the alien creature. "Now," he said, his voice steady but curious, "start talking. What's going on here? Why is this kitten so important?" The alien's eyes met his, and the silence stretched on for a few moments before it spoke in Jack's mind. "It is the last of its kind. The others were taken. It needs your help, but you don't understand yet. There is much more to this than a mere kitten." Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" The alien hesitated, as though weighing its words carefully before responding. "You will see in time, human. The kitten, it holds the key to something much bigger, something that will change everything. But it can only survive if you protect it." The words hung in the air like an unsolved mystery. Jack didn't understand, not yet. But there was something about the alien's voice that told him the journey ahead would be more complicated than he ever expected. The kitten's survival, and the creature's cryptic words, had set him on a path that he could no longer turn away from. And so, with the tiny alien creature nestled securely in his arms, Jack Tanner the mechanic found himself at the edge of something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. Something that would change his life, and the fate of the galaxy, forever. Jack sat back against the cold metal wall of his workshop, still feeling the weight of the strange alien kitten in his arms. He had already started to see signs of life returning to the tiny creature. It wasn't much, just the subtle twitching of its ears and the soft rise and fall of its chest, but it was a sign. The fever was subsiding, and the fevered heat in its tiny body was becoming more manageable. Jack, always the practical one, let his mind wander, trying to process the overwhelming questions swirling around him. Where had this alien kitten come from? And why was it important enough to be dropped at his doorstep? The creature, with its bright glowing eyes, had already left an indelible mark on him, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. He carefully set the kitten down on the makeshift bed he'd made from some old cloth he had lying around, watching as it curled up into a tight ball, looking somewhat more comfortable than before. Jack kept an eye on it while tidying up the shop, though he couldn't focus entirely on the repairs scattered around him. His thoughts kept drifting back to the alien's cryptic words. It holds the key to something much bigger. What did that even mean? And what had happened to the rest of its kind? Why had it been abandoned here, in this forgotten sector, in the first place? There had to be more to the story than what he was seeing, more than just a lost alien creature. He heard a soft, almost imperceptible scratching noise from the corner of the room. He turned and saw the small alien creature stirring, its eyes blinking slowly as it stretched its legs. Jack froze, realizing he had been so focused on the kitten that he hadn't given much thought to the alien that had brought it to him. The creature was standing there, watching him with those wide, intelligent amber eyes. It hadn't moved since it handed over the kitten, but now it seemed to have regained some of its energy. Are you okay?" Jack asked, his voice uncertain as he took a cautious step toward the alien. It hadn't said much since that initial moment when it had dropped the kitten into his arms, but now it was standing there as if it was waiting for something. Jack found it hard to believe this strange being was anything other than what it seemed alien and yet somehow familiar. It didn't seem threatening, but something about its posture, the way it held itself, suggested there was more to it than met the eye. The creature's response was a soft mental voice, almost like an echo in Jack's head. "I am not well. My kind. My people are not here anymore. The kitten is the last. My kind will die without it." The words came slow and broken, as though the alien was still recovering from the emotional toll of what had happened. Jack felt a pang of sympathy, but he still didn't fully understand. The creature had not explained what it meant by "my people," or what exactly had happened, but it was clear that it was not the only one of its kind. The weight of this situation was heavier than he anticipated, and Jack felt a deep responsibility forming in his chest. Before Jack could say anything more, the alien creature shifted closer, its hands trembling slightly, though Jack could feel no malice. The creature placed its hands gently on the kitten, who was still curled up on the workbench. The alien's fingers brushed against the kitten's fur with a tenderness that contrasted with its frail and alien appearance. "I need to tell you why it is important," the alien's voice echoed again. "The kitten is a key. You must protect it. You don't understand yet, but you will soon. It is the last of us of my kind. It has the power to rebuild, to awaken, but only if you help." Jack couldn't ignore the desperation in the alien's voice. He stepped back, giving the creature room, but his mind raced as he tried to piece together what he was hearing. The kitten wasn't just some random alien animal, it was connected to this creature's race, and perhaps the fate of an entire species rested on it. He didn't know if he was ready for something this big, but the sense of responsibility continued to grow. It felt as if his role had shifted in an instant, as if he were being thrust into the middle of something far greater than himself. "All right," Jack said, his voice steady but unsure. He couldn't think of any other words to offer, and it was clear that the alien wasn't asking for anything less than his full attention. He ran a hand through his hair and nodded to the creature, who seemed to exhale in relief. "All right, I'll help, but I still don't understand. What's so special about this kitten? Why are you here? What happened to your people?" The alien's gaze softened, and for the first time, Jack saw a flicker of emotion in its eyes, a sadness, a pain that ran deeper than he had expected. "My people. We were once a thriving race," it spoke softly in his mind. "But we were hunted by a race so far beyond us that we didn't stand a chance. The kitten, its kind, it was the last hope for my people. It is the last of its kind, and the only chance to stop the extinction of my species. We were erased, one by one, until there was nothing left but this. This is why we have traveled so far." Jack didn't know what to say. His mind reeled from the enormity of the situation. He was sitting in his shop on Sector 13, a quiet outpost, and yet here he was, caught in the middle of an intergalactic tragedy. An entire species had been hunted to the brink of extinction, and now the last survivor, this strange alien creature, had come to him for help. It was overwhelming. He wasn't equipped for this, wasn't trained for anything beyond mechanical repairs. Yet the pull of responsibility, the call to do something bigger than himself, was undeniable. He placed a hand on the small alien kitten, its fur still warm beneath his fingers. Its tiny chest rose and fell rhythmically, and though Jack knew it was fragile, something in his gut told him this wasn't just an innocent animal. It was the key to something far more profound. The future of an entire species rested in his hands. "I'll help," Jack said again, more resolute this time. though he still didn't fully understand what that meant. But I need more answers. I need to know what you're asking of me. The alien nodded, its eyes never leaving him. I will show you, it whispered in his mind. The journey ahead will be difficult, and there are forces still searching for us. For the kitten, we cannot stay here. It is not safe. But together, we can stop them. The Krishna are coming, and they will not stop until they have wiped us out entirely. Jack took a deep breath. He hadn't asked for any of this. He had been content fixing engines, working on spaceships and mechanical problems, living a quiet life. But now, it seemed that the quiet life was over. The responsibility that had been thrust upon him was far greater than any engine he had ever fixed, and he realized, in that moment, that his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. As he looked down at the alien kitten, curled up and fragile in his hands, Jack knew there was no going back. Whatever this was, this adventure, this mission, it was now his. The small, abandoned alien kitten wasn't just a stray. It was a symbol of the survival of an entire race. And Jack Tanner, the mechanic who had once only cared about fixing machines, was now the protector of its future. Chapter 2. The Hidden Past. Days passed, and the quiet mechanic shop on Sector 13 began to feel more like a base of operations. Jack, though still adjusting to the magnitude of what he had gotten himself into, could feel the shift within him. He no longer worked just to fix ships or engines. He worked to protect a life that was more important than anything he had ever known. The kitten, now more lively and active, grew stronger with each passing day. Its fur had taken on a more vibrant hue, and its bright amber eyes shone with a sense of recognition, as though it too had accepted Jack as its protector. The alien creature, who had introduced itself as Xyrith, was an enigma. It had told Jack little about its past, only bits and pieces, fragments of a long-lost civilization. What Xyrith had revealed was that it and the kitten were part of a species known as the Valkyrii, an ancient race that once thrived across the stars. Their civilization had been peaceful, their technology far ahead of many others, but their downfall came at the hands of a relentless enemy, the Krishna, an alien species bent on consuming every life form they encountered. The Krishna were not content with simply conquering. They destroyed, eradicated, leaving behind no traces of the civilizations they wiped out. The Valkyrii were the latest victims of this horrific campaign, their species nearly driven to extinction. Jack spent hours learning what he could from Xyrith, trying to piece together the history of the Valkyrii and their enemies. The kitten, though still small, was the last hope. It was genetically engineered to be the next step in the Valkyrii's evolution, capable of harnessing energy from the stars themselves, a power unlike anything Jack had ever seen. As the days passed, Jack realized that the little creature he had rescued was more than just a survivor. It was a weapon, a key, and perhaps the only chance for the Valkyrii to rise again. The days following the discovery of the alien kitten had been a blur of uncertainty and strange revelations. Jack had spent the better part of his time learning everything he could from Xyrith, the mysterious alien who had brought the kitten into his life. Each new piece of information came like a jigsaw puzzle, fitting together in ways that Jack could hardly begin to comprehend. What he had once assumed was a quiet, lonely existence on Sector 13 had turned into a battleground, though the war was more psychological than physical. There were forces at play here, ancient, powerful forces that Jack had never even known existed, and now, he was at the center of it all. Xyrith, the alien who had entrusted him with the care of the kitten, had been the last of its kind. Its race, the Valkyrii, had once been a highly advanced species, flourishing in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, their knowledge spanning centuries. The Valkyrii were not only peaceful explorers, but also incredibly powerful, their technology far surpassing what Jack's people had ever dreamed of achieving. They had harnessed the power of the stars themselves, creating ships that could travel through galaxies with ease, and they had developed the ability to manipulate energy in ways that were almost incomprehensible. Yet despite their power, their downfall had come at the hands of a race even more terrifying, the Krishna. The Krishna were not just conquerors, they were parasites, a species so intent on devouring and assimilating everything in their path that they had no concept of compassion or coexistence. The Krishna didn't want to enslave or rule. They wanted to eradicate entire species and use their remains to fuel their own insatiable need for power. For centuries, they had hunted the Valkyrii, erasing entire star systems from existence. until there was nothing left but a handful of survivors, including Xyrath. And now, the last surviving Valkyrie had made its way to Jack, entrusting him with the responsibility of safeguarding the final hope for their kind, the Kitten. The Kitten was not just a pet, it was a living, breathing embodiment of the Valkyrie's future. It had been genetically engineered to carry the power of its ancestors, a power that could restore the Valkyrie's civilization or, if in the wrong hands, obliterate entire galaxies. The Kitten was, in essence, the last of its kind, a being capable of bending energy to its will, capable of reviving the Valkyrie from the ashes of their destruction. Jack, a simple mechanic with no aspirations beyond fixing broken ships, now found himself at the center of a cosmic struggle. The Kitten wasn't just a small, alien creature he had found abandoned in his shop. It was the last hope for a species, and its survival meant the difference between the rebirth of the Valkyrie and their total extinction. But there were threats on the horizon. Xyrath had warned him that the Kreshna were not far behind. Even though their species had been pushed to the brink of extinction, the parasites had an insidious way of infiltrating every corner of the galaxy. They never stopped hunting, never stopped searching for what remained of the Valkyrie. And now, with the Kitten alive and well, they would come for it. They would come for Jack. As the weight of the situation began to settle in, Jack found himself torn between his desire for a quiet, simple life and the overwhelming responsibility that had been thrust upon him. His quiet life as a mechanic no longer existed. The survival of an entire species rested on his shoulders, and there was no escaping the fact that his role in this story had become far greater than anything he could have imagined. But the question lingered. Could he protect the Kitten? Could he protect the last hope of an entire civilization from an enemy that had consumed everything in its path? Xyrath seemed to sense Jack's turmoil. One evening, as they sat in the small, dimly lit corner of Jack's shop, the alien creature spoke again, its voice soft but laden with urgency. The Kreshna will come for it. They are always watching, always hunting. We cannot stay here. Not for long. Jack looked at the Kitten, still curled up in a makeshift bed, its glowing eyes watching him with a calmness that belied its importance. So what do we do? I'm no soldier, Xyrath. I'm just a mechanic. The words felt hollow as they left his lips, but they were the truth. He had no idea how to protect a species, let alone how to deal with a group of ruthless parasites that had destroyed entire civilizations. He was good with machines, good at fixing things, but this was different. Xyrath met his gaze, its expression unreadable but full of unspoken wisdom. You will learn. You are not alone in this. The Valkyrie may be gone, but their knowledge is still here. The ship you will need, our last hope, still exists. But it is hidden, and to find it, you must first protect the Kitten. The Kreshna will come, but they do not know where it is yet. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. He had no idea what kind of ship Xyrath was referring to, but one thing was clear: whatever it was important. The Kreshna would stop at nothing to get their hands on it. They were predators, relentless in their pursuit of power, and Jack couldn't afford to let them catch up to the Kitten. The only way to fight back was to find the ship, and to do that, Jack would need to rely on the very knowledge that had been left behind by the Valkyrie, knowledge that was now accessible through the Kitten. The Kitten was not only the key to their survival, it was a guide. The stakes were higher than ever, and Jack realized he had no choice but to dive headfirst into the unknown. He had never signed up for this, but now he couldn't back out. If he failed, the consequences would be catastrophic, not just for the Kitten, but for every living being in the galaxy. The Kitten's future was his responsibility, and that responsibility would guide his every decision from now on. Chapter 3. The Hunt Begins. The days after Xyrath's warning felt like a blur of frantic planning and preparation. Jack had no time to waste. His old life as a mechanic was a distant memory, overshadowed by the knowledge that his every move from this point on could mean life or death, not just for him, but for an entire species. The weight of this responsibility pressed heavily on his chest as he worked through the night, preparing his old ship, the Nova, for a journey that would take him far beyond the borders of Sector 13. Jack had never imagined he'd be involved in anything like this. His life had been simple, predictable, fixing broken-down ships, performing repairs for the occasional traveler or miner who stumbled upon the station, and living for the quiet solitude of a small, isolated workshop. But now, with the alien Kitten safely secured in the corner of his workshop, Jack had become something else: a protector. His heart raced every time he glanced at the small creature, knowing what it represented. He could sense that its power was immense, that it was not just a creature, but the last beacon of hope for an entire race. The map of the galaxy, which Xyrath had provided, pointed to a hidden location deep in the asteroid fields of an uncharted system. The ship that the Valkyrii had left behind was their final sanctuary, and only the Kitten could lead Jack to it. Yet, as he studied the map, Jack realized the journey ahead was not going to be easy. The system was located far from any known trade routes, and the asteroid field surrounding it was treacherous, even for the most experienced pilots. "I can do this," Jack muttered to himself as he worked on the Nova. His hands moved with practiced ease, checking the ship's engines and ensuring the fuel levels were sufficient for the long journey ahead. The ship had been gathering dust in his garage for months, but now it was being prepared for something far beyond routine repairs. This was no longer about fixing engines or replacing parts. It was about survival. The Nova would be Jack's lifeline, his means of transportation to the unknown, and the Kitten's future depended on it. The next day, after finishing all the necessary repairs, Jack turned to Xyrath, who had been observing him quietly. "We leave tomorrow," Jack said, his voice steady but filled with determination. Xyrath nodded, its amber eyes glowing with something that could have been gratitude. "You understand now," it spoke in Jack's mind. "You are ready." Jack didn't reply, but his eyes were filled with a quiet resolve. He was ready to face whatever came next, even if he didn't fully understand the path ahead. All he knew was that he had a responsibility to keep the Kitten safe, to protect it from the Kreshna, and to unlock the mysteries of the Valkyrie's hidden ship. The journey was dangerous, and there would be no turning back. But with the Kitten by his side, Jack knew he was not alone. The hunt was beginning. The engine of the Nova thrummed to life with a deep vibration that filled Jack's chest, reverberating through his bones as the small ship lifted off from the forgotten spaceport of Sector 13. The cockpit lights flickered, the displays shining dimly in the shadow of the station's faded steel walls. There was no turning back now. The Kitten, still nestled in its blanket, had grown accustomed to Jack's presence, though it still had a quiet, mysterious aura about it. It was as though the creature knew that its survival and perhaps the survival of an entire species rested in Jack's hands. Jack had known that the asteroid field they were about to enter would be treacherous, a sprawling mass of rock and debris that would require all his skills to navigate. His hands were steady as he guided the Nova away from the spaceport, the ship's thrusters firing in a steady rhythm. The Kitten, now more alert than before, shifted in its small bed, its glowing amber eyes flicking toward the window as the vastness of space unfolded before them. "You ready for this?" Jack muttered under his breath as he plotted their course toward the asteroid field. It was more of a reassurance for himself than the Kitten, but somehow, saying the words aloud made him feel more grounded. The Kitten mewed softly in response, its small body shifting in the makeshift bed, and Jack could almost swear it nodded in agreement. Jack wasn't foolish enough to believe he was alone in this. He had Xyrath's words to guide him, the alien's cryptic but meaningful instructions about the journey ahead. The Valkyrie's ancient ship, the last hope for the species, was out there somewhere, hidden in the heart of the asteroid field. The Kitten, he knew now, wasn't just important for its species, it was part of a legacy, a genetic marvel created to hold the power of the Valkyrie. It was more than an animal, it was a key. But Jack had learned quickly that keys could unlock much more than doors. They could open portals, and sometimes those portals revealed dangers far greater than anyone anticipated. The asteroid field was as chaotic and unpredictable as Jack had been warned. Asteroids, some the size of small moons, drifted slowly through space, their gravity while pulling smaller objects into their path. Jack had to calculate his every move, using every piece of the Nova's advanced navigation system to dodge the incoming debris. The ship's shields, barely enough to keep up with the bombardment of dust and rock, hummed in protest as they glided through the dense field. Every second felt like a gamble. Jack's knuckles were white as he gripped the controls. The Nova shuddered as a rock collided with the shields, and he quickly adjusted the ship's trajectory to avoid the larger pieces. The Kitten mewed softly, and Jack glanced over his shoulder. It was as if the creature was aware of the danger, its small body trembling with the ship's movements, but it didn't show signs of distress. It was the only thing that gave Jack the confidence to keep pushing forward. He couldn't afford to fail now. The Kitten's survival, no. The future of the Valkyrie depended on it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, The asteroid field started to clear, revealing the outline of an ancient structure in the distance. The remains of a massive, forgotten shipwreck floated lazily in the quiet space beyond, its outline barely visible against the backdrop of the stars. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he spotted it through the viewport. There it was, what remained of the Valkyrie's final stronghold. He had found it. The wreckage was not like anything Jack had ever seen before. Its structure was graceful yet formidable, a reflection of the Valkyrie's advanced technology. It was a vessel designed for war, built with elegance, but with the unmistakable signs of having been involved in a great battle. Its hull was scarred, heavily damaged from long-forgotten conflicts, but it still exuded a sense of power, a dormant energy that seemed to pulse beneath its surface. Jack brought the Nova closer, cautiously approaching the wreckage. The Kitten stirred once more, its gaze locked onto the derelict ship, as though it recognized something from its past. Jack slowed the ship's descent, keeping a careful distance from the wreck. He needed to be cautious. There was no telling what kind of dangers might still linger in this place. The last thing he wanted was to make a wrong move and awaken something far worse than the parasites they had been running from. As he circled the wreckage, searching for a way inside, he noticed something odd. There were no immediate signs of life. No movement, no signals, nothing to indicate the presence of anyone who might still be aboard. It was as if the ship had been abandoned in a hurry. Yet, there was something else. A strange, low hum emanated from deep within the wreckage, almost imperceptible, but enough to make Jack's instincts flare. Something was here, something that had been waiting. Without further hesitation, Jack initiated the landing sequence, bringing the Nova to a gentle rest on the wreck's hull. He had no idea what he would find inside, but the Kitten, his silent companion, was at the center of it all. The creature's importance had become all too clear. It wasn't just the key to the Valkyrie's legacy, it was the bridge to unlocking the power buried deep within the wreckage. It had to be. Chapter 4. The Awakening. Jack stood at the entrance of the wreck, staring at the eerie silence that surrounded him. The ship's massive hull loomed overhead, casting a long shadow over the surface of the asteroid as he adjusted his suit and gathered his tools. He glanced back at the Kitten, now perched on his shoulder, its tiny body steady and confident, as if it understood the journey that lay ahead. Jack felt a strange sense of camaraderie with the small creature. It had come to him for protection, but now, as they faced the unknown together, Jack realized that it was more than just a protector of its species. It was the harbinger of a new beginning, a new chapter in the history of the Valkyrie. As he approached the wreck's entrance, Jack could feel the hum of energy growing stronger. The wreck's systems, though dormant, were still active, their ancient technology flickering to life as he approached. It was clear that whatever lay inside was far beyond anything Jack had seen before. He entered the darkened corridor cautiously, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The walls were covered in strange symbols, alien scripts that Jack couldn't even begin to decipher, but they seemed to pulse with an energy that resonated with the Kitten. The deeper he went into the wreck, the more intense the energy became. It wasn't just the ship's technology, it was something else, something alive. The Kitten's glow had intensified, its amber eyes now shining with an almost hypnotic light, guiding Jack through the ship's labyrinthine corridors. The air grew heavier, charged with an electric anticipation that made Jack's skin tingle. It was as if the ship had been waiting for him, waiting for the Kitten to return. The further they went, the clearer it became that Jack was not just a visitor in this place, he was a part of it. They reached the central chamber of the wreck, a vast, circular room filled with strange alien devices and dormant consoles. In the center of the room stood an enormous pedestal, and upon it lay the core of the Valkyrie's power, a pulsating energy source unlike anything Jack had ever seen. It was beautiful, terrifying, and yet undeniably alive. The Kitten leapt from Jack's shoulder and approached the pedestal, its tiny paws delicately tapping the surface of the energy core. For a moment, everything was still. The hum of energy grew louder, and then, as if responding to the Kitten's touch, the core activated. A surge of light exploded from the pedestal, enveloping the room in a brilliant glow. The ship's ancient systems roared to life, and Jack could feel the power of the Valkyrie coursing through the wreckage. The Kitten, now glowing with an otherworldly energy, stood at the heart of it all, its small body vibrating with the energy it had unleashed. Jack's heart raced as he realized the full extent of what had just happened. The Valkyrie's ship, dormant for centuries, had awoken, and with it, the power to reshape the fate of the galaxy. The Kitten was the catalyst, the living key that had unlocked the ship's ancient systems and power. And now, with the energy of the Valkyrie at their fingertips, Jack understood the true responsibility he carried. The Kreshna, the deadly enemies of the Valkyrie, would come. Jack knew that much. But now, with the Nova and the Valkyrie's power at his disposal, he had the tools to fight back. This was no longer just about saving the Kitten, it was about saving an entire race, an entire future. And Jack Tanner, the mechanic from Sector 13, was now the protector of that future. As the light from the core intensified, Jack felt a sense of purpose fill him. He was no longer just an observer, he was a part of something much bigger. The Kitten, the Valkyrie, the ship, all of it was now his responsibility. And with that responsibility came the power to shape the future. The hunt was over. The real war was just beginning.